Hey everyone, welcome back to Project Celebrating Singles. I'm your host today, Catherine, and we got Christy here in the hot seat again. And here we are. There's a group of us. We're on a mission to change the way that the world views singleness. And so we are just really excited to tackle some of these bigger things that we're dealing with in life in regards to romantic love, value, finding affirmation, different things and things around us, and just understanding why we are here, what we're supposed to do in this time if we're single for an extended amount of time or we're single again, whatever that looks like, and how to make the most of our time, go after healing, go after just having more wholeness in our life, more joy, adventure, all these things. And so, Christy, here you are, girl.
Here we are, round 2.
Yes, that's right. And so excited. You have some news. You recently turned 37.
Yes, here we go.
Yes, come
Here
on.
we go.
Hey, give us a little barometer, single and loving it, single and hating it, how are
Mhm.
you, where are you at these days?
Yeah. Oh gosh, I would say single and loving it,
Hmm.
which is wild, actually crazy to think that I could be 37 and single and loving it. But definitely I don't know, I think I'm ready to date. I would say definitely there's been, obviously cycles in singleness where you're like, man, I actually don't miss dating at all. And then sometimes you're like, oh, actually I'm excited for that. And I think I'm actually I'm still loving it. And I would totally be excited about a new relationship. So, which I love to be able to coach people to get to that place, which that place is
Hmm.
possible to actually not be miserable, and be able to date from that baseline of actually, I'm really happy with my life, but I'm also open. So we'll see.
Right. That's good. I love it. And yeah, things we've talked about on other episodes is like, just because you're single for an extended amount of time doesn't mean that every season of singleness is going to be enjoyable, right? And there are times when, being honest, you're like, okay, this is really difficult. Wish I had a partner. What does that look like? And there's moments where you just get to embrace those emotions and things that you're walking in, right? So thanks for the barometer. Glad to hear that things are going all right for you today, which is great. Just great to hear. So excited for you on your 30, going into your 38th year, which is good. But so we've been hearing a few different lessons that we've been getting from people, ideas, insights, all these things. And one thing we talk about on the online course is taking an inventory of your life to kind of gauge, get another barometer of like, okay, what are my friends like? What am I doing? How am I watching TV? This and that. What am I spending my time with? My extra time. Who am I surrounding myself with? What does that look like? And oftentimes I think this can pull up a few unhealthy coping mechanisms that you could be very aware of as you're taking inventory of your life. And so I'd just love to hear, Christy, what does that look like for you, your journey, unhealthy coping mechanisms? Where did these things pop up and how did you navigate through them?
Yeah, so I would definitely say a lot of these things popped up for sure. Which we definitely, so part of taking this inventory of your life is because as a single, especially for single working professional, maybe you've been single for a certain number of years, there really isn't anyone else to contribute some feedback into how you spend your time. And so it's actually pretty important to take inventory and to pause, just do some spring cleaning, is how I like to put it. But yeah, there were definitely a lot of unhealthy coping mechanisms that I honestly didn't have any understanding that they were unhealthy at the time, which is kind of crazy. I've definitely shared in other episodes that I had a huge drinking problem. And
Mm-hmm.
unbeknownst to me, that was definitely hiding a lot of trauma, a lot of shame and different stuff emotionally that I didn't really realize. I just thought it was like a hobby. I'll never forget. My boss was like, Christy, you need a hobby. And I'm like, I do. It's going out. That's my hobby. It's just a little bit of a problem. That's the only thing you like to do outside of work. So, not a little bit, it was a huge problem. So that's definitely one. And then I would say eating. I didn't do any binge eating or any kind of thing like that. But I would say eating, if I was having a bad day, it would be I need a glass of wine and I need my favorite. I would go get this 5 cheese pasta kind of deal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's well, wait a minute, that's actually not the healthiest thing to do in that moment. So basically any unhealthy coping mechanism you can start to identify where you are avoiding sitting alone with painful thoughts. And if I know we've talked about attachment theory a few episodes, but I like to say I'm a recovering avoidant attachment style.
Mm-hmm.
And I had things for days to avoid my feelings. And I had a friend who's a therapist and she was like, Christy, do you have any idea what you're feeling on a day-to-day basis? And I was like, I just don't think I really have negative feelings. I'm like, I just don't think I'm like that. I'm a 7 on the Enneagram, the enthusiast. I just don't think I
Mm-hmm.
have negative. feelings, which is hilarious. But this is pretty common actually for avoidant attachment styles. So I would say we actually organize our life, right? I also talked about like I was a control freak. I had organized my life so that I couldn't have time to sit with negative emotions. And so that is typically, I would say, most people's experience in their singles later in their 20s or their 30s. And where they're single working professionals, they have probably designed their life so that they don't have to sit with any kind of margin to think about their negative emotions or to even pretend to process those. Which you can kind of skate on by for any number of years with that. And in fact, I meet people much later in life that have actually continued in these patterns. But I will say it eventually catches up to you, whether it's a really stressful time at work, you get laid off from your job, boom, now all of a sudden you have a ton of margin. Or I like to encourage people like this also steals from your vacations. So if you are not developing a healthy mechanism of processing, just processing, not even just processing negative things, processing good things. But if you're not developing a healthy rhythm of that in regular life, you're going to spend your first few days of your vacation so anxious because you don't know what to do with yourself. Like that was my life for many years. Like I would like plan this elaborate vacation, spend all this money going around the world, but I could not sit on a beach alone with myself in a book. Like I was like, just literally so much anxiety. Like I would be checking work email and I was just like, oh, I just love working. Well, no, I actually couldn't. I didn't have the rhythms in my brain, my body, nothing to be able to actually live in a healthy way. So, okay, I've talked a lot in general about why this is bad. I'll give you some other examples. I would say, so obviously binge drinking, one of them, eating. I would say like honestly, shopping was a big one for me. And it was really sneaky because this one wasn't like, I wouldn't go and splurge on an item. I would go to Target and drop like $200 on random stuff. And I didn't realize this until I started becoming a minimalist. And then I realized, oh my gosh, like I literally dropped $200 on Target without even thinking on a bunch of random stuff that I don't actually need, that clutters my life. I don't want it around anymore. And what was interesting, I didn't actually discover that one until I started this practice that actually a girlfriend encouraged me to do. So people kind of understand maybe fasting from food. So it's actually super healthy for you. It's been known to like cure cancer, like regularly fasting from food. Or you can go in like different fasting cycles. But this friend decided she was going to fast, spending money once a week. And I thought, oh, that's kind of an interesting concept. Like, and she just used it to kind of just like practice self-control with spending. And she's a single woman as well. And so this helped her like just manage her budget better. I was like, oh, that's kind of an interesting concept. And so I decided to try it. Well, interesting. If you want to learn what you're using to basically cope and avoid your feelings, start deciding one day a week you're going to fast from spending money. Oh boy, all the stuff comes up at the surface. I want to do takeout. I want to do all of a sudden, like, I want to go do everything. And I'm like, I've committed to myself that I'm not going to spend money on Tuesdays. Like, oh shoot, I had a really tough day at work and now I can't order takeout. I can't order Uber Eats. I can't go to Target. What am I going to do? So I love kind of this practice because it actually forces some things to the surface that you do probably need to deal with. And again, some of these, are more unhealthy than not, right? Like binge drinking 3 or 4 nights a week, pretty unhealthy, physically, emotionally, all sorts of stuff. But then like going to Target, most people are not going to think about that. Like, oh, whatever. So she like spent $200 at Target. I was not going into debt. It was just like unnecessary items to buy. But both were actually helping me successfully avoid dealing with my feelings and processing. And so that's where I would say, like, as I coach different people, I help people identify these areas of their life. And as a single working professional, most people don't really have that visibility into your life. And so it's hard to do on your own. It's not impossible, but it is helpful, obviously, to do with a coach or with a group of people, like, doing our online course and stuff. We encourage people to do. But I would say those are some examples of some unhealthy coping mechanisms that just keep you from truly processing what's going on in life.
Right. Yeah. That's good. I want to hear more from you later about how to walk out in the opposite way, and what are ways that you can have a healthier lifestyle. But before we go into that, I'm just curious, so these unhealthy coping mechanisms, you're aware of them. But what are some things that blocked you at this time from walking in health, would you say? When you were aware of these mechanisms, I was thinking, oh, there's more blocks coming up. And what were some of those things that were just like hindering you from making changes or recognizing exactly what was going on in your life?
Yeah, I would say like one, honestly, it was like just a lack of hope that I could
Mm,
change. Like, I think so many people, like, oh, Christy, you're surely going to get married. Like, you're beautiful, you're successful, all these things, like, you're surely going to get married. And then year after year after year, it just didn't happen. And so I would get
mm-hmm,
more and more frustrated. I would get more and more just like angry with myself. What do I need to be doing differently? All this stuff. And and then you kind of get into like really heavy discouragement, really heavy. I mean, even, obviously some of my friends have really struggled with depression over this
mm-hmm.
topic and over this issue. And so I would just say like any kind of like hopelessness, like you've got to find your way out of that. And there are ways out of that. And helpful tools, practical tools of ways that you can do that. So I would just say that was definitely a blocker for me is I just thought things would never change. Like I totally believed the lie
Mm,
that I couldn't change. And then I started working in tech and I started understanding growth mindset and neuroscience and neuroplasticity and all this stuff and how our brains can be rewired. So that
right.
kind of started to produce some hope in me that, oh, wait a minute, I actually think I could make some changes
Right.
that would actually produce different results.
That's
So
good.
pretty
I think an important piece there is really that your hope isn't put in the partner that you hope to get eventually, but the hope
yes.
is that you can change, because
Yes.
then that could still be something that doesn't happen in the long run. And when you've put your value, all your eggs in that basket, then that hopelessness could come back. So I think really analyzing where is my hope today? What am I putting my hope in? And recognizing, oh, there's hope for change today. Like there's hope for growth, right? Even if it's just little 1% growth mindset, all of that, right? Step by step.
Huge difference
Mm-hmm.
between putting my hope in getting married someday, putting my hope in my future husband or my future partner. Huge difference between being content and enjoying my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is super important, whether you stay single or whether you have a partner someday. If you don't actually enjoy your life that you already have, then marrying someone else or getting with someone else is not going to just fix all of those things. In fact, it's going to probably add to it because you have another broken human being that you have to live with and deal with all their junk too. Like
Right.
there's definitely stuff that I obviously am of the opinion I've shared a lot on the podcast of just like the healthier we are, the healthier baseline you have when entering into a new relationship. I actually see relationships thrive in ways that you're like, wow, but they did a lot of work on emotional health leading up to that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's like a bank account. Like I'm super pumped and excited to see people, like the science that's out that allows for us to enter into this territory of emotional health, I think is extremely incredible. Obviously, there's still so far to go. And any, therapist or anyone in this field would say we still have a long way to go. But the more and more we've learned over the last 40 years, I'm really excited to watch, I think, like a generation make significant changes in the future. And so I'm pretty excited about that, pretty pumped. And this
Yeah.
community is doing it. Like we're hearing the stories and it's incredible to see just the stories that are unfolding, I would say, even with this community. And so I'm pretty excited for that.
Yeah, you're right. We are in the age of information, right? Where science is backing all this stuff up. And so we have answers to our questions in ways that we've never had before, resources that we can use to help us on our journey. And so it's really exciting when you get to partner together with like-minded people to see a change, in your lives. So it's huge. Can you talk to me a little bit about past relationships and
Mhm.
ways that they get brought into the future with you, and then tie that in a
Oh,
little bit with like
yeah.
people pleasing, things like that?
Yeah, how past relationships affect the future. So, okay, I'm going to introduce a concept that's kind of a generally accepted concept. Like some people have some questions about, but I think it actually makes sense and it helps give vocabulary to something that's very real, very something I've experienced and I have walked. I don't know how many women, dozens of women through this. Like I literally had I could have had I mean, it is becoming my full-time job now, but like I could have had a full-time job doing this in San Francisco, just with like colleagues and friends. But so it's a concept of a soul tie.
Mm,
So the concept basically explains this could be physical or emotional. So it could be due to a physical intimacy that you've had with someone, but it could also be emotional intimacy that you've developed with someone. And it could be with someone that you don't even know. So what is a soul tie? It's anywhere where you're like, oh, I'm like I would walk a certain direction at work just to maybe see someone. or I would go over to a friend's house just to maybe see someone that could be there. Like that can be like an emotional soul tie. You can also, with texting and social media now, like we can get full on into unhealthy territory where we are communicating over and over and over with someone, but like there's no like real commitment to one another. And so that can get really unhealthy, but also like physical intimacy. And so how this plays out, how do you know if you have a soul tie? One example is like you're constantly thinking of that person and there's just a lot of intrusive thoughts. They could be bad or good thoughts, but there's just a lot of frequency of those thoughts. And then the other thing is like they'll show up in your dreams. You'll start like worrying if you go to like a certain bar, a certain restaurant, like, oh, am I going to see this person here? Like any kind of like, I would say like anything like that is entering into territory where you likely have a soul tie. And so super unhelpful, super unhealthy. A lot of us don't really want our exes part of our future, right? That's why they're an ex.
Right.
And so whether they're awesome. Like I can actually have really good things to say about my ex-boyfriends. Like they're all incredible people. And they treated me well. And like, I really actually don't have, but I don't maintain friendships with them. That's just a personal choice of mine. But they're also like 3 cities removed. And so I don't really have a reason to keep in contact with them. But I would say like there's definitely something that was like an emotional soul tie that was still plaguing me for years after the relationship. And so really what you can do if you recognize you have a soul tie is like we teach you to break up with the lie. You can break up with the soul tie with this person. And just, I encourage you to like use your voice. Like I think there's power in our voices. And you know, a bunch of people understand this now with affirmations and different things. And so I encourage people use your voice and literally break up with the soul tie with this person and literally send everything back to them and receive everything that's yours. And then I usually like kind of sit and hold some space and kind of like ask for like just an idea of something that you can kind of walk that out. And so one really good example of this is to get rid of any belongings that remind you of that person. It could be a present that they gave you. It could be something that you used to wear a lot. Like I decided to actually get rid of a bunch of clothes that I used to wear a lot when I dated this one person, because every time I wore that outfit, it would remind me of a memory with that person. Not helpful. Like I'm trying to live a new life. I'm not trying to live in the past. And so I decided like, you know what, this part of my wardrobe just needs to be sunsetted and go on its journey. And so that was something really important to me. I would say I've talked to other people, really cool stuff where one client literally got rid of all of his old stuff from his ex-girlfriend, like had it all over his room. But it wasn't like anything like that sentimental. It was just like random stuff that she had bought him. Well, literally within an hour, his now wife DMs him and like it basically like unlocks this whole beautiful relationship. They end up getting married. It ends up being this amazing story. But literally he had like a trash bag and just went through his room and got rid of all the stuff. And then literally within an hour, this new relationship just like unfolds. Or she like first messaged him, I guess. They went on a date like a few days later. But I just love that story. And I have dozens of stories like that where it's pretty gnarly. Like I had one friend that her ex had bought her MacBook. And I was like, yo, I'm going to tell you, I really think you got to get rid of this. And she was like, it's my MacBook. I'm like, yeah, exactly. Use it all the time. Like this is something you're using all the time. But it's tied to like financial, like this financial aspect of your old relationship, which he did. He like bought her a lot of things. And so she was kind of in this shame cycle because she didn't make as much money as him and this whole thing. And I was just like, sell the MacBook, get a new one. Like you can do that. Like you're a very capable woman. And it was just so interesting how she was like, oh my gosh, all the thoughts of him totally went away the moment I did that. And it was like, okay, let's roll. And so I've coached so many women with this tool, super impactful, super important. Yeah, I think that'll wrap that one. But you asked about something else that I do think actually that we need to hit on.
Yeah, I guess the heartbeat behind it is that what we do affects the world around us. It affects our partner. It affects us. And so really being conscious about that, right? And I think also too, just on a more high level is that's why we also want to be conscious about like, who are our partners? You know, who are we getting into relationships with? What does that look like? Because we're sharing so much with them, right? That's both impacting us emotionally, mentally, physically, all of that. And so it's just so important to think about that. And yeah, but I think about so many times where people, you know, have dreams of someone they dated years ago, or thoughts, like you said, the intrusive thoughts about that. And it's like, wow, where does that come from years and decades ago, even, that this stuff pops up. And so, yeah, I think this idea of getting rid of these soul ties is actually really good and intentional, and like setting time aside to be like, okay, this is the day where I'm breaking up with so and so. In my heart, in my mind, we're just saying goodbye and making that separation, and really severing that and being intentional. And then even with that idea, when those thoughts, if they do come back, those, thoughts that could be a little bit more intrusive and you don't want to go that way, that's when you're just intentional in your head and you're being like, you know what, that's last year. Like, that's a long time ago. I'm not going there anymore. Like, I'm breaking free from this and I'm starting my new life, and I'm just going to continue onto this journey. Right. And so I think it's important to be passionate and just know what you're doing in the new season that you're walking into, right? Where you're like, I'm going to stand firm on this and I'm not going to go back.
And that's where friends can definitely hold you accountable, right? We encourage people to get a workout buddy when you do our online course. And I definitely think like, and really that just means like a friend that you do this program with. But the idea is like, they're going to be like, hey, you talk about this person a lot, or you're constantly comparing this new person you're dating to your ex. Ooh, yikes. It's a big one. Like, oh shoot. And you definitely do not want to do that. Like, you don't want to like accidentally do that to the new person. And so it's super important to like figure out those things. Also, on this note, I think it's important to know one of my clients actually felt like she had like learned anxiety in her last relationship, and she had just kind of taken it on as her new identity. And that is a big fat lie. And literally, so I teach her how to break the soul tie. She breaks the soul tie. She breaks up with the soul tie attached to this person. And within literally the next day, she like comes back and she was like, are you kidding me? Like, I am a brand new person. Anxiety is not part of me. And it was literally because her ex really struggled with anxiety and she still had a soul tie with him. And so you're going to struggle with the same things that person deals with. Literally. And there's like this concept of your soul is being tied. And so it's really interesting. And I think a lot of people have different opinions on this, but from my experience in coaching literally dozens, if not like 100 people by now with soul ties, it is so interesting how effective this tool is. And, people dealing with dreams of their ex once they're married. And it's like, nobody wants to deal with that. Right. And it's pretty embarrassing to admit. And, but once they break up with the soul tie, it goes away. So especially if there's anything that's in your life where you're like, man, I had an ex that definitely dealt with this. It's like, okay, there's a really good chance you need to break up with that soul tie.
Yeah. And I've heard it said this way, that your soul is your mind, your will, and your emotions. So if your mind is tied to that person, like you said, you're thinking about them. If your emotions are drawn to that, attached to that person, you have an emotional soul tie. It's like your whole life is directed towards this person, right? And so when you have these unhealthy attachments and ties to people, how can you look forward and go straight ahead when you're being drawn this way, right?
Yeah. Just another like kind of like sneaky way this pops up is I used to like dress a certain way that my ex really liked. But actually the new person I was dating like really didn't like it. But I had like attached my beauty to dressing in a certain way. And I was like, oh shoot, this is like really, really unhealthy on a bunch of levels. And I realized that like I had to like literally like break up with those thought patterns. And once I broke up the soul tie, it literally like went away. And I started realizing like, oh, I actually really like, I enjoy dressing completely differently than how this particular person really would like compliment me and like liked. And so that's like another way of like, dang, if you're catching yourself dressing a certain way. I see a lot of this play out with women, like pretending to like a certain sport. So I think like early on, high school, whatever, like it's like, oh, I'm going to pretend to like this sport because that's how this guy spends a lot of his time. And so unhealthy. And actually it's actually, so it leads into codependency and people pleasing, which I guess we could probably go to next. Because this people pleasing kind of root system is what I'll call it. Like talk about something I want to take a sledgehammer to. Like this thing has like totally wreaked havoc in my life. And to be perfectly honest, like and vulnerable, like I would say it was a huge factor in me giving my body away physically to a bunch of people who didn't earn it or deserve it. And from a very young age, I felt like this obligation. Actually, this reminds me of a research study that actually made a pretty big impact on, I would say, like helping me realize how much people pleasing was playing out in my life. And I think I want to kind of be vulnerable in this moment and share. So it was a research study. It was a TED Talk. And this woman, I got sent to it by some colleague, I think. And this woman had done research on women and their kind of participation with kind of sexual activities, and really interviewed them later on if they regretted it, if they were okay with their decision afterwards, and different stuff like that. And it was really, really eye-opening and honestly really alarming to me. Young women, like middle school, high school age girls, that immediately like was this huge wake-up call of like, oh my gosh, like I'm a woman in, I guess, my mid-20s at the time. And I'm saying like, this is freedom. And I'm saying like, I get to explore this and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, but wait a minute. Like, I don't want that for my younger cousins. I don't want that. Like if I had a daughter, I actually wouldn't want that. And so it totally changed the game for me. And it was this really profound moment that was really a turning point for me, where I realized that people pleasing is playing out in the way I give my body away to people who didn't earn it. Like literally it would be like, I'm at a bar and someone's giving me attention and I feel obligated to go home with them. And it's like, no, this is actually, and under no circumstances do I have any obligation to this person for talking to me for 2 hours. But that was literally my thought process. Like that was like how bad my brain had been warped into this people pleasing and this just really negative root system. And so I just like, I don't know, I'm really passionate about getting rid of people pleasing tendencies for this reason, because it ended up playing out in my life in a way that I ended up deeply regretting later. And so that actually sent me into this territory of understanding how people pleasing was playing out in my life, and recognizing that me not knowing my value and me entering into territory of like, it could start as innocent as like, oh, I'm going to pretend to like football when I actually don't like football. I actually do enjoy football, but I've coached a lot of clients that like pretend to like football just because their partner really likes football. And then they pretend to be like this amazing, whatever fan of like some team.
Right.
When before this relationship, they actually didn't care at all. But if you actually get down the root, they're like, I actually don't enjoy spending every Saturday watching my husband get wasted. And now I'm married to this person and this is a huge part of his life. And this actually has nothing to do with things I enjoy. And so again, if you don't develop that as a single and you don't know the healthy baseline that you need to have in your own life, people pleasing is going to continue to steal from you. And that root system is really, really ugly. And it leads to codependency, leads to a bunch of other stuff that is just not going to end up in a healthy relationship moving forward, whether it be a romantic relationship, healthy friendships, a bunch of different ways that plays out. And so I think it's really important to start identifying that and really making changes. You know, I have shared this, I think, in another episode, but like a simple way this plays out is like when I go and visit someone's house and they're like, hey, what do you want to drink? And like, I'll have like a real idea in that moment. Like, where if I were at my house, I'm going to have tea. Or if I'm at my house, I'm going to have like a sparkling water. But because I don't want to inconvenience someone, I'll just ask for plain water. And I started realizing that. And I was like, wait a minute, this is a way that I am like, I'm people pleasing. I'm like, oh, I don't want to inconvenience you. Is it that much more inconvenient to like make tea or to grab a sparkling water than give someone regular water? Like if you're at my house, I'm happy to serve you what you actually want in that moment. Like I actually would love to like go grab a sparkling water from the outdoor fridge or like, you know, make you tea. And so, but in my life, that's like a really small example, but you know, a really bad example is obviously like, you know, I'm at a bar. And this has been years ago, but this is literally how I live my life. I'm at a bar and someone spends like 2 hours talking to me. And now I feel obligated to go home with him and do something physical with him. And you're like, what? Right. On what level does that actually like, is that actually a healthy thought pattern? If we look back and we look at our daughters or we look at, you know, young people, we would never, ever want them to give their bodies away. And in fact, most parents now don't even want their children hugging someone they don't want to hug, right? That's really healthy. Like if you don't want to receive physical touch from someone, you get to use your words and have a choice in the matter. And our culture has so like gone this other direction with people pleasing that I think it's really this bad subconscious thing. And that's what this research study ended up, I wish I'll be able to find it so we can link it in the notes, but it was like pretty profound for me. And it was a pretty pivotal moment for me to realize, wait a minute, how is this playing out in my life? And I want to make sure that this is not playing out in my life anymore.
Right.
So yeah, it was a pretty profound moment.
And I love it how you're finding it at the most minute little detail, you drinking tea or coffee or water, because it's actually those little moments that then lead into bigger things, right? Of like, oh, this could actually be something where, oh, I feel obligated to go home with a guy after being at the bar, right? Because the little things actually, it's all the same, like you're saying, the same root system. Whether it's something little or something larger, it's the same. And so being able to uncover why is that there? How did get there? And then going forward with it, right, is so important. So I love that you're using all those little examples. It's good. It's powerful.
Yeah, well, I just love to be able to help clients identify where this is playing out in their life. And it does. It plays out in little tiny ways that you wouldn't think anything of, right? I think I'm just being a polite Midwest person by telling someone, I just want plain water. But actually, if I were at my house, this is what I would have. And that's kind of my trick in my mind. If I were at my house, what would I have right now? Okay, I'm gonna then have that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I can. And I'm not going to worry about inconveniencing someone else. And so that's definitely like a bad baseline, again, that we don't want to be operating from.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So we've talked a little bit about taking inventory, unhealthy coping mechanisms, things that could pop up, soul ties, people pleasing, all these blockages and hindrances. But let's look forward a bit now. And how do you practically walk some of these things out in a healthy way? In the days to
Yeah.
come, talking about a little bit of growth here or there. One thing that I like to think of, we can get so excited about something new that we hear that all of a sudden we're like, I'm going to stop everything and I'm going to be this amazing superhero, I'm going to do X, Y, Z. And we just get so intense, but it's like, I'm going to do this. But actually, no, it's so much more about the little moments, the little growth day by day. And it's about consistency so much more over intensity, and being so passionate about making these changes. And so what does that look like, Christy? How do people practically apply themselves? What did that look like in your life? And yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Well, another shameless plug. And we don't necessarily the podcast is here for its reason. Obviously, we want to give a bunch of free resources, but we do a deeper dive. So everything we give away on the podcast, just like an FYI, we do a deeper dive and help you actually unpack some of these tools in the online course. But so I would say some ideas for this is identifying like where you start having unhealthy behaviors and then working backwards from that and trying to like help that. So one thing is I realized, I talked about earlier that I was, my friend who's a therapist helped me realize I'm totally avoiding processing my feelings, negative feelings. If I have an unhealthy or if I have a bad day at work, I'm going to go have an unhealthy meal or I'm going to like down a bottle of wine. And I thought that was totally normal.
Mm-hmm.
And, in moderation, all these things are like totally okay, right? But it was
Totally.
not in moderation in my life at the time. So I would say the first tip is creating margin in your calendar. So what this looked like for me is I started doing one evening per week. And then I started doing Saturday mornings where I just blocked it. And I was like, this is Christy time. And again, at first, I didn't like spending time with myself. So obviously, there were ways that like self-reflection and journaling and doing things I enjoyed, like working out and going to the beach, different things that I decided, you know what, I'm going to decide I like to do this and I'm going to prioritize that time for that. And I also started realizing I actually do enjoy spontaneity. And so having that one evening a week that wasn't booked out 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks in advance, really crazy how my schedule worked at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like having that one moment of spontaneity, just having like a 2-hour, even if it's just a 2-hour block to have some spontaneity in my life really started helping me have margin to process feelings, have margin to process emotions. And so I would say that would be like one of my tips to start going down healthier patterns is just creating margin in your calendar. It's so valuable. There's a bunch of neuroscience to prove that we actually need even just like a 10-minute break. It's good for your eyeballs, good for your brain to
Mm.
process what you just went through. I mean, I worked in tech, so it was like back to back to back meetings, like literally 30-minute meetings, boom, 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 all day. I would like get done with work, still have to work. And this is like pretty normal for this culture, but I had no time to even process what just happened all day. And so
Right.
I realized I really needed to protect that. And that's like the hard part is you say no to a bunch of stuff to say yes to yourself and your own mental health and your own things. So that also blocking Saturday mornings meant honestly turning down a ton of social activities, baby
Mm.
showers, wine tours, you name it. Everyone loves to plan some fun on Saturdays. And I just realized when I took that margin of Saturday morning and I slept in, and
Mm.
then I went and got a healthy breakfast, worked out, went for a run, time with my thoughts, time to process the week, time to catch up on laundry and do random stuff that I needed to do, all of a sudden I would actually like enjoy the rest of the week. But if I didn't protect that time, I would be burning out pretty regularly, getting sick, like all these other bad cycles. And so for me, that was how creating margin looked. But for other people, like different clients have different rhythms. Some people really like early mornings, right? They're training for a marathon or something. They'll have extended mornings of kind of, that quiet time. A lot of my friends would like surf or swim. And I often will tell people like finding some kind of, whether it's something with fitness or some kind of a hobby where you're not attached to media, you're not attached to a device. Actually super helpful for your brain to process things. So that's really good. I would say definitely like working out in something of prioritization of physical health. This can be as simple as a walk. So if you're not like a big fitness person, and I would say I'm not, but like going for a walk is helpful and will pay off in the long run. Right. And then I can't say this enough. We talk about this a lot. We talked about this, I think the last episode, journaling. As honestly, I can't help but talk about it a lot because it's been so powerful in my life and it's so simple. Like you can afford it. Everyone can afford it. It's pretty easy to start learning how to do. You just have to practice. You just have to push through the initial awkwardness of it of like, I'm sitting here and I'm supposed to process. And what does that look like? I would say like, initially getting started with journaling, like ask yourself a question. Like I like to start with a question of like, what am I being weighed down by? Like that's like a good starter for me because there's a good chance like throughout the week, there's a bunch of stuff that I've taken on. Anxiety about, a sick family member or stress of work or who knows what else, right? It's like, okay, let's get all of those burdens out on the table and get them on paper. And there's something really powerful about that. So, and then walking through like, getting to like, okay, what am I dreaming for in the future? What do I want, what do I want the end of the year to look like? Let's work backwards. What changes do I need to make now in order to look at the end of the year and say, wow, this is a really great year. I'm really proud of the year that in the life that I'm building. Those types of self-reflection questions. And you can Google and find honestly some good journaling exercises. And if you take our online course, we also give you some really good activations. So shout out to our friend Mateo that built those activations. Are awesome. I've honestly been so blessed. So those are some ideas.
That's
Catherine,
great.
I'm sure you
That's
have
good.
some goodies here too. Is there anything that
some ideas?
you would add to that?
I mean, just really to reiterate, like I was saying earlier, it's not about being so intense about it as much as it's just being aware, of like, oh, this is good for me. This isn't good for me. Okay. So how do I incorporate more of the good than the negative in my life in this time? And then reevaluating, little bit by little bit and seeing the changes that are happening in your life. So yeah, the solitude piece I think is huge for me. I definitely love that one. And like you said, it takes a little bit to get into it. You're like, oh, because you're so used to being busy and the world really values busyness as success, And so when you're able to take a step back and slow down, to really enhance my solitude time, I just got a rocking chair and I love it. And it's like my favorite item that I own right now. And so I'm like, oh, rocking chair, just slow down, journal, rock, back and forth. And really, because I'm more of a doer. I love to do things. So now I'm rocking while I'm processing. It actually helps me to slow down a bit more and just be like, yes, what is going on, and all the journaling. So yeah, being intentional, and it is something that almost kind of needs to force you to slow down, right? And then obviously everyone is wired differently. I'm big on being outdoors at least a little bit every day, get outside on a walk. I started working out recently with no audio. So that's been amazing. It's been a game changer to process all the things that are coming up and to really understand what's going on just in my body while I'm working out. So it's been huge. I think, the more we can get off social media, the more we can get off our gadgets, the better, right? Because we weren't born attached to those things, they came after the womb. And so it's so important, I think, just to really decompress from the busyness of life. And getting away from gadgets, I think, is very huge. So, which even,
so
on your Saturdays, are you getting away from gadgets usually on your little Saturday mornings? Is that a thing as well?
It is. So I'm glad you asked, actually. I was just going to talk about that. So when I was working inside of Facebook headquarters, there were these two, they both happen to be men, not that only men can have good ideas, but in this instance, it both happened to be men. And I realized one was a swimmer and one was a surfer. I thought that is so interesting. They both came out with like amazing innovations and things that are total game changers in the tech industry. And I happened to find out that one of them was a swimmer and one of them was a surfer. And I started thinking about that. I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Like, I wonder what about those hobbies potentially unlocked like this really revolutionary thinking. Like, they both, like,
Wow.
they just didn't invent something. They invented something that was wildly different than what we had before.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like total visionaries. And I started thinking about, wait a minute, you can't have your earbuds when you're surfing or when you're swimming. Like, I think they were just alone processing their thoughts and thinking about new ideas and thinking about new ways of thinking and all this stuff. So yeah, so actually on Saturday mornings, I have a pretty hard stop. In fact, I ended up getting 2 cell phones. It's a whole nother story. But I got a cell phone that I specifically use on Saturdays. So
That's great.
Israel, they practice this thing called Shabbat. They actually go totally without phones. And I really like it. I adopted it. I'm not Jewish, but I really,
That's
really like
great.
it. And I was like, wait, I'm going to do this. But I ended up getting 2 phones as a result. And just because I need it for, I don't know, different reasons. But I don't really use that phone throughout the rest of the week. So it's a really clean phone, text message wise or email wise. My work stuff is totally not there at all. But I do try to get off the device for the most part of at least early Saturday. And it's a game changer. It's a huge game changer. So I think that's interesting that you stop working out with AirPods and noticing a difference. That's cool.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's fun. Yeah, and I love that you're talking about the Saturday morning, the extended time, because really burnout in our culture is huge. It's so huge, you know, and there's always going to be another friend to see. There's always going to be another party to go to. There's always going to be more work to do. Always. That stuff is never ending, you know, but to really cut out that extended time of margin weekly, I agree with you that it's so significant. It's so important. If you want to be consistent in your rhythms and your health, emotionally, spiritually, every area of your life, then it's really important to have these rhythms of rest and slowing down, right?
Yeah. Well, and you know, I often tell clients, like, you're going to do that anyway if you start a new relationship. So you might as well build that in now. So like, think about it. If you're starting a new relationship, you go on a date, it goes well, you need some margin in your calendar to go spend more time with that person. And we've all maybe had that feeling of falling in love. Like, you start clearing stuff out of the way, right? You're like, I'm willing to move this. I'm willing to move that. I'm willing to get done with work early to go spend time with this person. I'm willing to finish, you know, studying, whatever it is. And so you find the margin when you're motivated to spend time in that relationship. And so I often am encouraging my clients, let's create those habits now. Let's actually create that in your life now. And you're going to, again, get healthier. You're going to benefit when you head into that new relationship because you're going to already have rhythms in your life where you're like, oh, actually, you know what? I'm open to it. Now, don't like totally like give all your margin away to this new person unless it's like, okay, you're really feeling this relationship. It seems like it's a go. And there's a commitment. I think that's important too, right? Situationships is a whole nother podcast that maybe we'll do sometime. Where, you know, different things, but I would say definitely to create that margin now. And then when you do find someone that you want to go spend more time with, oh, by the way, I have one evening free a week that I already built into my calendar. You don't have to wait 4 weeks then to see that person. Now it's like, okay, I actually keep Tuesdays open, but I'm willing to like see where this is going, and I'm willing to give you Tuesday. So I think that's like something super, super helpful for people.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good. And, you know, we're big on the self-discovery piece. When you have these extended times of margin, you get to uncover different ways that you didn't recognize that you operate, things that you're passionate about, things that you enjoy, that you're like, whoa, I love this, you know, maybe baking, journaling, running, exercising, all these different things, right? It opens up a whole new world where you get to understand who you are, how you're wired, and what you're passionate about, right? And so, yeah, that's good.
For sure.
Love it, Christy.
It's pretty awesome.
That's great.
Agreed.
Anything else you want to share on that, or should we wrap her up?
Man, you know, I feel like we've talked about so much. I definitely, so I want to put out an encouragement to our community. I think already we've identified people just online, honestly, that we didn't know before, but that I am like really encouraged how they've been living. Like, we've been sharing, obviously, and I've been trying to like put a microphone in front of everyone I know that I think has some really practical, but also really encouraging stories to share. But I just want to encourage you, like, if you've been listening to the podcast for any amount of time, or you've taken our online course and you want to get involved, that was really our like impetus for starting this, was just like, hey, let's like put this out here, see who else is kind of like willing to go on this journey.
Mm-hmm.
And turns out some really amazing people are also on this journey all around the world, right? Like now we're not just like, most of us are in the North America kind of territory, but we've started now to meet friends in different continents even. And so I'm eager to like hear those stories and learn from different people. And so if that is something that you would love, you can email us at info@celebratingsingles.com. And we would just love to hear from you. Like if you have other ideas, if you have a topic that you're like, man, this is really hard, I haven't seen you guys approach this topic yet, like totally send that in. Or if you're like, man, I would love to get involved. If you want to host something in your local city,
Right.
we love to see people getting activated for in-person events. And we can kind of coach you towards that end. If you want to take the online course with like 3 to 5 friends, we offer group discounts. And so there's like different ways that you can start to get involved, where you have to, I just want to encourage you, you're not alone. There is hope.
It's good.
I am now newly 37 and single, and I love my life. I truly do. Like, I'm not just saying that because we're starting this podcast. Like, I actually really, truly love my life on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And that just wasn't the case 10 years ago. And so I just really want to encourage people that there is hope. There is a life on the other side of the tunnel of all this stuff. And there are practical, really small changes that you can make in your life to get there. So be encouraged.
I love that. That's awesome. Yes, I'm right there with you, Christy. People talk about what they love, you know, and we've done a good amount of sharing and talking about singleness here. And so it's like, I'm here for it. And I love that encouragement to the community, because it's grassroots what we're doing. And we love inviting more people into it in whatever capacity that looks like. So, hey, thanks for stopping by the podcast today. If you listen all the way to the end, we're so grateful for you. Check out celebratingsingles.com for all things related to what we're producing these days and dropping. And we'll be back with another episode next week. And we'll see you then.